Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Skylanders Portalcasters. I'm one of your co-hosts, Inklander, and I'm joined today by GFDitto.
How's it going today, Inklander?
Doing pretty well, Ditto. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited to talk about today's topic.
Yes, and today's topic is the music of Skylands. We're going to be talking about some of the more popular and maybe most famous themes from the games, and also which game has our favorite soundtrack. So, Ditto, do you have any opening remarks that you'd like to start with on the music of Skylanders?
Well, Inklander, I find that the music is actually a lot better than I had anticipated it being going into the series, at least in some of the games. There are some tunes that end up getting stuck in your head in actually a good way, and then there are some that are just actually forgettable. I did notice that there's a very piratey sort of feel to the soundtracks overall.
That definitely makes sense because for those that don't know, the soundtracks were primarily made by 3 different people across the games. The main theme of Spyro's Adventure was made by Hans Zimmer, and the majority of the soundtrack was done by Lorne Balfe. And then we also had Matt Pirog, who worked with Lorne Balfe on some of the musical boss themes, which we're not going to be talking about that in this podcast. We're going to be saving that for a later episode. But it's basically those 3 people kind of working together. And Hans Zimmer and Lorne Balfe often work together, and one of the things they're most famous for is Pirates of the Caribbean. And you can very much clearly hear the Pirates of the Caribbean sometimes in a lot of the songs that they have, like Leviathan Lagoon. The main theme to Skylanders Trap Team really sounds like he's a pirate, so I definitely understand where you're coming from there. It definitely kind of has that vibe to it a lot of the times, because it is kind of reminiscent, or sounds like it might fit into Pirates of the Caribbean sometimes fairly well.
It really does, and I just feel like the composers probably drew inspiration from their previous work while designing it, and that's why they have such a similar feel to it.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I think that probably one of the easiest places where you can hear that kind of similarity is in Spyro's Adventure, especially with all the water-themed level music. So, you have Oil Spill Island, Darkwater Cove, Leviathan Lagoon, and you can definitely hear it there. You can also kind of hear the leading kind of beat to He's a Pirate with the main theme, where it very much sounds like a Hans Zimmer track. He has a very, very distinctive kind of craziness when it comes to composing, and you can very clearly tell that he is the one that composed the main theme to Spyro's Adventure, because it really does sound like you're about to just go off and do this like insane quest, and I think they really showcase that really well with the soundtrack. On the topic of the Spyro's Adventure soundtrack, I think looking at all of the soundtracks, while I don't know if it has maybe the most memorable themes, it definitely is probably one of the most cohesive soundtracks when it comes to all the games. And one of the reasons for that is because a lot of the songs are leitmotifs of each other, in that you might hear a song that kind of has the main theme as a leitmotif in it, but then also all of the elemental areas actually kind of play off of one another. They might use different instrumentation, they might have different tempo, but they still have a lot of the same melody at their core. You have Archean Armory, which sounds a whole lot like the theme for Quicksilver Vault, which makes sense because they're both kind of leading up to collecting the Eternal Magic Source, which I think is a really amazing thing that you don't really hear from a lot of video games, is that in this game, when you're playing through the fire levels, you can tell that you're playing through the fire levels because the themes are connected between the levels. Same thing with Falling Forest and Treetop Terrace. They all have a very similar melody, and that's something that is amazing to me, that Lorne Balfe went to that much trouble to make the soundtrack feel so cohesive between all the tracks to be able to tell a story with the music, which doesn't necessarily happen in some of the later games. That's really cool. It's really great to hear that. And honestly, I think Spyro's Adventure, when it comes to listening to it cohesively as a soundtrack, it's spectacular. It flows really well, and you can tell that it's from the same game. Ditto, do you have any other comments on the original Spyro's Adventure soundtrack?
I think you pretty much covered everything there was to cover on this soundtrack.
Now, moving on to Giants. Giants doesn't really go for the leitmotif thing as much as it goes for the big, epic soundtrack scores. That one is memorable for a completely different reason, in that a lot of the songs definitely do sound Pirates of the Caribbean related yet again. But you have the main theme, Giants, and that one is just spectacular. It's big, it's over the top, it's highly orchestrated, it's so much fun, and that plays on the title screen too. The main theme of Spyro's Adventure actually didn't play on the title screen. Here, the Giants theme is, playing in full force right when you load up the game. And it's such a great theme. The Giants theme is pretty fun. It's great. What are your thoughts, Ditto?
I feel like the main theme of Giants, it really does the job. It sounds big and epic, like the giant Skylanders are supposed to be. So I think it was done really well. It's fun to listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And one of the other things that's cool that you can hear in the in-game version of the theme is you can actually hear the giants stomping to the beat, which is kind of really neat. I like that they did that. That's not on the main official soundtrack, I believe, but you can actually hear they've added in giant sound effects, and considering how big and orchestral they try to make that theme, I think that just fits in even better. Now, another theme that I really, really like is for the second level in Giants, Junkyard Isles. That one is also similarly just big, orchestral, and just a lot of fun to listen to. Just, really kind of hits home, and it's a lot of fun. Another song that I really like from Giants is Cutthroat Carnival, because it sounds very similar to some of the piratey themes of Spyro's Adventure, which makes sense. It's Carnival that's been taken over by pirates, and the music is really good. It just kind of fits in with the rest of the Giants soundtrack, and also fits in with the pirate kind of motif that they've been doing in the games. And then some of the other ones in Giants that I think are just really good are Auto Gyro Adventure. That's another really great theme. And then, of course, the amazing final boss theme, Bringing Order to Chaos. You can't deny the music. The music's pretty great.
Absolutely. The music for that stage is beautiful.
Yeah. It's amazing, it's orchestral, it sounds like a Chaos theme. It's really well done. Ditto, do you have any other thoughts on the Giant soundtrack?
I believe you've touched on all the major points for this soundtrack as well.
Let's go ahead and move on to Skylanders Swap Force, where yet again we see a little bit more of the leitmotif angle from Lauren Balfe than we saw in Giants. He's kind of bringing that leitmotif kind of angle back to Swap Force from Spyro's Adventure, and he has a lot of really, really great themes. I think one of the greatest themes in it is the Swap Force. The main theme of the game is really, really fun to listen to, and I think it really sets the tone for a lot of the themes, which I feel are a little bit lighter. They aren't as heavy and orchestral as Giants had. I definitely think the Swap Force main theme really kind of sets the tone that you're in this new part of the Skylands, and it's kind of magical. Ditto, what about you?
It's a wonderful theme. It really is. It sets the stage for what's to come throughout the rest of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet again, we also see that leitmotif kind of thing come back. We even hear that with the main theme, because when you're playing through the game, before the post-game, Welcome to Woodburrow, the theme for Woodburrow, actually has a motif of the Swap Force theme in it, which I think is really cool. In many ways, it's kind of connecting the Swap Force as characters and their backstory to this location, and I think that really makes sense considering the story of Swap Force. Going off of that, once you do actually hit the post-game, you get the song A New Chiefess, which actually plays when Tessa is crowned the new chiefess of Woodburrow. Really good, really great, and while it might be a little bit infamous because, you hear it whenever Rufus starts talking to you, and it's welcome back to Woodburrow, hero of Cloudbreak Islands, and it's oh no, and then you can't skip it. It's really annoying. But if you ignore all those elements, it's actually a really nice track. It's really exciting, and it kind of feels very celebratory, which makes sense because it's celebrating Tessa, and it's also celebrating the end of the game that you're in the post-game, which is a really nice touch. And then I think the last major thing that I do want to touch on in Swap Force is that leitmotif thing again, because, you do hear it between Woodboro and the Swap Force themes, but you also hear it with some of the other areas as well, because yet again, Swap Force doesn't have you going around collecting elemental sources, but they do have it split up kind of in those sections of like 4 levels, 4 chapters, and each one's kind of set to a different kind of theme. You have all the snow and ice levels, you have the canyon kind of deserty levels. All the themes for those actually kind of tie together and have leitmotifs again, and you see that kind of interplay there, and that's really, really neat. There's tons of other really good tracks in Swap Force 2. Honestly, this is another really, really great soundtrack. Like Motherly Mayhem, which plays during the Chaos's mom fight, is really good, and the Winter Keep soundtrack being a remix of the original Spyro's Adventure theme, that's all really awesome. Oh yeah, and also the Braving Mount Cloudbreak track, that's used in like a lot of the commercials where the narrator's all like, only you can place the Skylanders on the portal and bring them to life to help save Skylands, or whatever he says. You hear that pretty much from Swap Force going forward for the trailers. You hear that theme, and it's just memorable because of the commercials. But overall, Swap Force, I think, is very great just because of the leitmotifs.
My final thoughts on the Swap Force soundtrack are that it's a very cohesive soundtrack, very melodic. It's one of those soundtracks that you can honestly lay down and fall asleep to. And I say this from experience.
Yeah, I definitely get that. This one is way more laid back. It's magical. It's very serene, for the most part, unless you're counting like Motherly Mayhem or something. It is a really relaxing soundtrack, and it brings back kind of the leitmotifs from Spyro's Adventure, but also at the same time is just gentler than the really heavy orchestral, like Pirates of the Caribbean vibe that Giants had for a lot of its soundtrack. Swap Force is a great soundtrack because it's very serene.
Absolutely, I could not agree more.
Now, moving on to the 4th game, we have Skylanders Trap Team. And this one kind of sort of went back to the Giants kind of formula, where it mostly just used a lot of the soundtracks from the previous games, but it did add in quite a few memorable soundtracks too. Ditto, what are your thoughts on the Trap Team soundtrack? What do you think about it? Do you have any thoughts maybe on the main theme or just the soundtrack as a whole?
The main theme is where I felt, once again, those pirate vibes. But the soundtrack as a whole, it felt very different. It was closer to what Giants had brought us before, but it was lacking the serenity of Swap Force, or, as you've brought up a number of times already, the leitmotifs. The Trap Team soundtrack did not seem as cohesive to me. But there were a number of individual tracks that I would say were memorable.
Do you have any that you would like to call out other than the main theme?
The Skylanders Academy theme is one of the more memorable ones. I spent a lot of time in the hub world, so maybe that's why, but that one is very memorable to me, as well as the Golden Desert and Chompy Mountain.
Yeah, I know. Like, that one's really good. I also have Soda Springs on here. That one's just such an interesting theme for a intro level because it just seems kind of like off to me. It's pretty good, but also at the same time it just seems kind of like mysterious but kind of silly, because previously in all the other games our like intro theme has been something like Shattered Island or Junkyard Isles, where it's big, kind of epic. Even, with Swap Force, we had Braving Mount Cloudbreak. But then here, we got, like, Soda Springs, which is a great track, and I really, really like it. And it is, orchestral. It has such a different tone. It's almost mimicking the Gulper and kind of how silly this is, that he's trying to, like, drink up all the soda at a soda festival. It really kind of, like, plays into the, like, silliness of it. And I really like the theme for that, because it just kind of isn't quite what I was expecting from a soundtrack for an opening level. One of the other ones that I have on here is Rainfish Riviera. I really like that one. That one also kind of carries over that piratey vibe. But then I think that the last one that I really want to shout out is Sunscraper Towers. That one's really cool because it introduces our light theme, the one that we hear in the light gates going forward. It's such a cool track. It seems almost ambient in a way, but also kind of mysterious. It also kind of feels a little angelic. And I really like that theme because it just feels like it fits the light element really well, and I think they pulled that one off really, really well. Ditto, what about you?
I actually didn't find Sunscraper Towers to be all that memorable, but I've only ever run through Sunscraper Spires, I think, a total of 3 times, so I haven't spent much time there, so I don't know the tune as well as I do some of the other ones. So to me, it stands out a lot less.
Gotcha. I mean, I think that makes sense because, as a speedrunner, you aren't going to be trying to speedrun through one of the adventure packs. But I also do think it's not maybe one of the most memorable themes, but I do think that it fits the light element decently well. But overall, I have to say, I think Trap Team probably has the weakest soundtrack of the ones that Lauren Balfe composed.
I can agree with that statement. I feel as though of the ones that Lauren Balfe composed, Trap Team is definitely the weakest soundtrack.
Yeah, I enjoy some of the themes that it introduced, but it doesn't have the epicness or cohesiveness that some of the other soundtracks did. It's good, and it's still great, but yeah, definitely not my favorite, which is sad, because I do really like Trap Team a lot, the game as a whole, but the music was maybe a little bit more lacking here. Alright, so moving on to the last game that Lauren Balfe composed for, because Imaginators only use stock music, so we're not going to be talking about that, just as all the villain themes from Trap Team were stock music as well. So Superchargers is actually the last game that we're going to be talking about. Ditto, what are your overall thoughts and impressions of Skylanders Superchargers?
Well, the Superchargers soundtrack seemed to do what Trap Team didn't, and it was a lot more cohesive in my opinion, and it blended a lot more of the elements from the previous soundtracks. It had the epic grandeur that Giant's soundtrack brought, and at points it still had the serenity that the soundtrack for Swap Force brought, and it blended together in such a way that you could really feel the intensity of the music as you played through the game.
Yeah, I think Superchargers has a lot of very powerful tracks. For the first time, the Inklander theme isn't the main theme. Instead, it's riffed into Overdrive, which was interesting that they went and composed a separate theme different than the Inklander one, because, we have the Superchargers as, the Inklander theme for the Superchargers. But then, they actually had a kind of completely different theme, and both of them have the big epic grandeur that some of the other themes have had, and I think they work really, really well. And, you hear the Superchargers theme in the vehicle zones and the Academy done in a different kind of way, which is cool. So you have the leitmotif thing kind of going on again, kind of like what you had with Woodboro in Swap Force. And then you also have tons of other leitmotifs too, like you have Matt's Miraculous Marvels in Cloud Breather's Crag, which has a leitmotif with City Under Sea, also in Cloud Breather's Crag. So you have some leitmotifs going on, you have the big epicness of some of the tracks like the Superchargers, Rift and Overdrive, not even to mention the racing music that got specifically composed for some of the tracks, like the After Party, which almost kind of sounds like Chef Pepperjack's theme, kind of also combined with Mesmeralda's theme, and then Chompy Garden, also really good. But then you have the Serenity of City Under Sea, of Waterdrop Way, Riftward Road. Honestly, I think Superchargers takes a lot of what some of the previous soundtracks did and really blends it together, as you said, Ditto. This really tries to take a little bit of the best from all the soundtracks and kind of combine it into something really awesome.
Well, you've pretty well echoed my thoughts on the Superchargers soundtrack, Inklander. I would say that the Superchargers soundtrack is probably the strongest in the series, in my opinion. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's my favorite. I still, when I sit down to listen to music, I would probably go for the Swap Force soundtrack instead, just because it's entirely mellow, and that tends to be the kind of mood I need to aim for more often. But overall, I would say the Superchargers soundtrack is the strongest one. It has a little bit of everything. It brought together the best of every one of the previous soundtracks except Trap Team, and kind of used that to make it the best it possibly could.
Yeah, I totally agree there. I really, really do appreciate the Spyro's Adventure soundtrack. I feel like that one's really up there because it's just so cohesive. A lot of the tracks are really memorable. But Superchargers is probably tied with it to me, if not better. It really tries to do everything right. It kind of checks off all the boxes on how to compose a soundtrack and how to make it cohesive, how to make it fun, how to make it exciting. And I really do think that it's a strong compilation of songs. So yeah, I definitely agree. Soundtracks aren't the only hidden gems we've got. Skylanders can also be found pretty much wherever you look. Let's go ahead and start a legendary treasure hunt.
welcome to the Legendary Treasure Hunt, where we undertake challenges to search out certain lots of Skylanders at the best bargain possible. Our challenge this week was to find a lot of Skylanders whose figures wield staffs with a price limit of $40. Each lot will be scored based on the point system of 1 point for each Skylander whose figure is holding a staff, and 1/2 point for every $5 under that $40 limit we are. Inklander, why don't you present your lot first? What have you found today?
Alright, yeah. My lot comes from eBay, and it is a lot of 8 different Magic Skylanders. It includes Hoot Loop, Enchanted Hoot Loop, Trap Shadow, Star Strike, Light Core Star Strike, Super Gulp Pop Fizz, Mega Ram Spyro, and Dune Bug. Of those, 3 of them are wielding staffs, so Hoot Loop, Enchanted Hoot Loop, and Dune Bug. And my price is $25.
That's a pretty good deal you found there. 8 Skylanders for $25? Not bad at all.
Yeah.
Your lot's going to be scored with 3 points for the 3 staff-wielding Skylanders, and 1.5 points for being $15 short of the budget limit, bringing your total to 4.5 points. Your lot's definitely a good deal for anybody who is a fan of the magic element, especially if they're a fan of Hoot Loop. Hoot Loop's a great swappable character.
Yes.
And you got the bonus of another swappable. You got Trap Shadow in there, Mega Ram Spyro, maybe not the best Spyro, but still really powerful. And then you got Dune Bug, who I know he's not your favorite, but I happen to really enjoy him. He's a lot of fun to play as. So that's a bonus.
Yeah.
So for anybody looking to just collect a few more Skylanders of the magic element, this would be a great lot to find.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Ditto, what about your lot?
I actually had a lot of trouble with this challenge. There aren't nearly as many Skylanders holding staffs as I thought there would be. I also found my lot on eBay this week. My lot is a pair of Double Troubles, both Series 1 and Series 2, nothing extra, at $8.99. So my lot isn't nearly as grand as what we would normally find here on Legendary Treasure Hunt, but it is a good deal.
Yeah.
And it does the job. If you're a fan of Double Trouble, hey, this is a great lot. 2 of them for $9.
Then you have 1 for each upgrade path.
Yes, absolutely. 1 Double Trouble for each upgrade path. My lot scores out at 2 points for Skylanders wielding staffs, and 3 points for being $30 under the price limit, bringing my total to 5 points. So by a 1/2 point, I am the winner of this Legendary Treasure Hunt.
You know, depending on what you're looking for, either of these would definitely be good. If you happen to be a Double Trouble fan, you know, you can pick that one up, put them on the 2 different upgrade paths. Or if you're looking more for like a collection of magic characters from Swap Force, then definitely go with my lot, where you'll get pretty much every magic Skylander from Swap Force except for Enchanted Light Core Star Strike.
I didn't realize that was the case. If yours is indeed every Magic Skylander except 1 from Swap Force, then I would say that's deserving of our super extra special point.
Oh, whoa, does that mean I win then?
Which means that, yes, indeed, Inklander is the winner of this week's Legendary Treasure Hunt by 1/2 point.
Yeah, there we go. Coming in right at the end there. I think both these are really good deals. As always, it just goes to show that if you're looking for something uber specific, you can find at least something. This is a good example of that. It's also a good example of how pretty much most every character that wields a staff is of the magic element, even though it was a battle class in Imaginators. But still, even if you're looking for something really, really specific, you can still find it.
Absolutely. There's always a deal out there for you. Oh, what's that? I see Captain Flynn waving us over. So with our legendary treasures in hand, let's go see what that's about.
Here we are on the Dread Yacht, joined by Mags, and we're looking out into this kind of stormy ocean, and all of a sudden, a crane grabs us and drops us onto the map. Yes, we're in Rainfish Riviera for this week's Dread Yacht destinations. Rainfish Riviera is a level from Skylanders Trap Team, and overall I found it to be mostly enjoyable. I definitely think it has flaws, which we will talk about. But Ditto, what are your overall impressions of Rainfish Riviera?
Rainfish Riviera is a level that I really happen to like a lot. It has one massive downside to it, but overall the majority of the level is actually pretty great. You've got two trappable villains here, both along the same theme, just for whatever reason they're different elements and not quite what you would expect. But they're a lot of fun to fight, they're a lot of fun to play as well. This stage, I believe, introduced the bridge mechanic, and that, well, it wasn't perfect, and it definitely takes a little bit of timing, especially if you're a speedrunner. It was a really cool mechanic, something that I thought was really just unique to this game, and really enjoyable.
Yeah.
But they also introduced a mechanic that doesn't work so well in this stage, and that's the crane. They would go on to perfect the crane in a later stage that we've already talked about before. That was the Willikin Workshop. Well, it worked well there. It doesn't work at all here. The concept was good. The idea of picking up the pirates and dropping them in the water, great in concept. The execution was terrible. And overall, the mechanic just did not work for this stage. Oftentimes, you would carefully aim your crane, and you would drop it at the pirate just to find out that you were a millimeter off and it counted it as a miss, or for the pirate to just jog out of the way because why not? And it is absolutely infuriating at times, especially if you're in the middle of a speed run and you miss 4 times because reasons.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with pretty much everything you've said. The biggest downside of this level is the crane puzzle mechanic. It's pretty clunky. It doesn't really work that well a lot of the time. It works better than an actual crane game in real life, but it's still not great. And the other kind of weird thing to me about the level is the villain elements. I felt like that was a little weird because you have Mastermind, who is of the undead element, but is kind of obviously supposed to be magic. And, you know, same thing with Brawlrus. There's no reason why Brawlrus should be at the tech element, but that's mostly a trap team issue as a whole, with them randomly sometimes picking elements for particular characters, when I feel like it's because they wanted to spread out the elements as much as possible through the levels in order to encourage people to want to go get more traps. But, you know, that's a topic for a different day. But it just felt a little weird to me because some of the villains didn't quite match up elementally the way that they should have, like Brawlrus, Tech Trap. Weird. But, you know, overall, though, I did really, really like the level. Like, of course, the music, and the theming's really great. I like the aesthetic. I like how it's raining. It's kind of dark and gloomy. The Rainfish / Leviathan callback, you know, that's cool. We actually talked about this level slightly when we were talking about Leviathan Lagoon, actually in our pilot episode. That's still cool to see. And, you know, I enjoy the, like, reveal of Chaos, like, posing as the information squid. That was kind of random. And I feel like they did have a good mix of stuff to do in this level. Like, they gave you some sky stones, they gave you some crane puzzles, they gave you some bridge puzzles, and this was the introduction of the bridge puzzle, and I feel like it was fine. I feel like it was just enough to be interesting, but not too much to where it was overdone. Dragon Temple, I feel like way overdid the bridge puzzle, but here, I think it's actually pretty good. I feel like it's a decent amount. But, you know, overall, I feel like there was a good mix of stuff to do. I didn't exactly like the crane puzzle thing. They could have maybe done something else, like, instead of trying to introduce that, just throw in block puzzles or something, or light beam puzzles. They have other things they could have done. But, you know, still, it was pretty satisfying. I never felt like I ever got to a point where it was incredibly boring or it felt like filler. There was always still something to do. Even if I didn't like the crane puzzle parts, it still felt like, you know, it was evenly dispersed. And overall, I felt like the level is a little short, even, you know, going into all the secret areas, but it was still like a really satisfying amount of stuff to do.
And one final thought on Rainfish Riviera is I also disliked the point where Mags blatantly lies to us. When you go to pick her up with the crane, she says, just drop me anywhere. If you don't drop her in that orange circle, it doesn't count.
Oh, yeah.
And I felt lied to, and I still feel lied to and deceived by this. Especially when you realize this in the middle, once again, of a speedrun.
Yeah, I know. It almost makes you think that Mags was actually Luminous in disguise yet again, with Mags, just blatantly lying to you like that. I definitely agree. That part is a little annoying. And I guess one other thing that I do want to mention, just as kind of like an extra kind of a side thing, is that this level actually has giant boulders in it. Like, giants actually can pick up and throw some of the boulders on the level, which is actually cool, because that's pretty much restricted only to Chaos Doom Challenge otherwise, as far as I remember. So actually having the giant boulders in there, that's pretty cool. Now, speaking of villains like Luminous, I think it's now time for a Skylander to instead battle another Skylander. Let's head on over to the Archean Arena.
And now we enter the Archean Arena, where we pit Skylander against Skylander in a bout of theoretical combat. Let's introduce this week's contestants. Inklander, who have you brought with you to this week's arena battle?
I have brought a fairly well-known Skylander. This is a character that I would say is everyone's favorite purple dragon from the Spyro series. Yes, I have brought with me today Cinder. So, Cinder is an undead ranged character with 780 health, 58 critical hit, 31 armor, 38 speed, and 24 luck. Her primary attack is Spectral Lightning, which deals 39 damage. She has her Shadow Dash, which does 0, and also her Cinder Flight, which does 0. She has two different paths. One of them is Nether Wielder, which is upgrading attack 1, and then her bottom path is Shadow Dancer, which kind of relates more towards upgrading attack 2, such as, ghost slowing down enemies, gaining duration, range, increasing the damage of attack 2, etc. So that's kind of the overview of Cinder. So, Ditto, who did you bring with you today for the Archean Arena?
That sounds like a fairly formidable foe you've brought with you this week, Inklander. I have brought with me Fright Rider.
Ooh.
Fright Rider is an undead melee-style character with 810 maximum HP, 62 critical hit, 31 armor, 38 speed, and 28 luck. His attack 1 is melee attack, which does 42 damage. His attack 2 is jousting charge, which does 29 points of damage. And his attack 3 is burrow bomb, which does a whopping 68 points of damage. Fright Rider's top path is called Sir Lancelot, and it allows attack 1 to gain combos, charge, and increased damage. And his bottom path is known as Joust Jockey, which allows attack 2 to gain increased speed and damage, and allows for attacking using attack 1 or attack 3 during a charge to add additional attacks.
Gotcha. Yeah. Fright Rider, I think, he is one of those forgotten characters, but he is definitely a lot of fun, and he can definitely pack a punch. I think this is definitely an interesting matchup in that, Cinder, very popular character, and, she's a lot of fun, but the thing is unless you go with her bottom path, her Shadow Dash is not really going to be that useful, and you're pretty much going to be relying mostly on the Spectral Lightning, which is weaker than Fright Rider's attack 1. So Fright Rider does have slightly better critical hit, luck, and also higher health. And a lot of his other attacks, his secondary and tertiary attack, they are, fairly powerful and would be able to deal a lot with Cinder's moveset here. So, meanwhile, I do know that Cinder can hold out her own. She is pretty fun. She is pretty powerful. I feel like Fright Rider would definitely be giving Cinder a run for her money here.
Oh, absolutely. I would open the match by jousting charge straight at Cinder. She tends to be more of a ranged character, as you've pointed out by the fact that she, without a path option, she only has her primary attack to deal any kind of damage at all with. And that, even though it is ranged, the range on it is honestly very, very short.
Yeah, it is.
So I would get in as quickly as I could with jousting charge, maybe joust right through you a few times to get my point across before I start melee attacking, at which point I would assume Cinder's going to get off a few shadow dashes just trying to dodge.
Yeah.
And so it would just be a question of dodging versus my jousting. And if I were to be able to predict where your dash is going to come up and I'm able to switch to the attack 1 button in time, that melee attack actually hits really quickly.
Yeah, it does.
So it's a question of how well can Cinder dodge, and how well can she predict where I'm going to be in order to get off those lightning bolts to deal the damage she needs to do in order to take me down.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, with Cinder, it's pretty much going to be a game of dodging. And, Cinder is pretty speedy, but also so is Fright Rider. And Cinder also has lower health. So, you're already pretty likely to be able to chase after me, get in quickly, and, deal way more damage than I'd be able to deal to you. And considering Cinder already has lower health, that's not really looking too good for Cinder. So honestly, in a 2 out of 3 match, I think Fright Rider is going to take it here. Cinder might be able to, if I'm able to dodge enough and, be able to get in some Spectral Lightning here and there, dodge some more, keep trying to repeat over and over again that pattern. I might be able to pull out one match, but I feel like it's pretty clear that Fright Rider would be best in a 2 out of 3.
I would say so. As much as you might be able to read where my melee attacks are going to come in when I'm going to stop charging and melee attack, there's also the unpredictability of when instead of hitting melee attacks, I'm going to go ahead and hit attack 3 and burrow bomb you.
Yeah.
And that, if that lands, that's going to be a little bit more devastating.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
It's a game of basically whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
It's dodge and bash, dodge and bash. It's a question of who can predict where we're going to arrive and make the hit. What allows for Fright Rider to have a clear advantage here is that Cinder's dash doesn't do any damage, whereas Fright Rider's does.
Yep, and that's the biggest difference, is Cinder, is also hindered by having that flight ability, which was really cool in Spyro's Adventure in Giants, because it lets you access certain areas, but like in a PvP situation, it's pretty much useless, and the Shadow Dash, not being able to deal any damage up front, it's not really too great for Cinder. So both would be able to dodge, but, I think Fright Rider, he'd just be able to have that advantage, as he said.
I feel like even if Cinder was on the path that allows for her attack 2 to deal damage, the number's not significant enough in order to make a difference here.
No, it is not. So I would say 2 out of 3, easily Fright Rider takes this.
I can agree with that. And that would mean that this week's Archean Arena winner is Fright Rider.
That brings us to the end of today's episode. You'll find our website and our individual channels listed in the description. Follow our Twitter at SLPortalcasters for regular Skylanders discussion and Imaginator design challenges. Thank you for listening, and in the next episode, we will be discussing Portal technology. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.